BiomedRx Optimum Woman is the only woman's high-potency full-spectrum multiple vitamin supplement to contain 56 nutrients, including those most important for today's woman, such as calcium for bone health, iron for healthy red blood cells, beta-carotene, biotin for nail and hair health, gamma-linoleic acid from evening primrose oil, octasanol, grapeseed extract, a potent antioxidant important for maintaining capillary strength, and vegetarian digestive enzyme. Visit www.biomedrxsupplements.com.
Gold label quality BiomedRx CBD oil is made from organic hemp that is locally grown, glyphosate-free, gluten-free, non-GMO, homogenized, third-party tested, and CO2 extracted. Visit www.biomedrxcbd.com.
Hi, this is Devin Lockett, the president of JobSite Route. As the son of a general contractor, I know how difficult it can be to get good food on the job site. And letting your construction workers leave the job site to buy lunch just takes valuable time away from them being on the site. I've developed an app and a program that will bring a steady stream of food trucks to your job sites every month for the low price of only $100 per month per site. That comes up to about $3 per day to have a steady stream of food trucks coming to your job sites all day, every working day. You can also contact the food trucks ahead of time and pre-order your food from the menu on our app. This saves valuable time for your construction workers and for you. It also sends a variety of delicious food served on Southern California food trucks to your job sites all day. When you think about it, it only makes sense to join the JobSite Route Network. So exactly, but we're across. We're in the same parking lot as the 24-hour fitness. 10 a.m. Would you like to come by at 10? All right. All right. What's your name? Okay. I'll see you at 10. I'll be here. Thank you. Bye-bye. Business always calls. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. I hope everyone's having a wonderful week, and I hope you have a prosperous week. That's what we're really after this week, a prosperous week, prosperity. Thank you for joining me. Good morning. Today, we're going to discuss a condition called Munchausen by proxy. Now, I've been working in the medical field since the year 1983. Okay, I've been a biomedical engineer for many years. And typically what I've heard of as Munchausen syndrome is what we would call in the hospital the thick chart syndrome. When someone has a thick chart, or when someone appears to be a hypochondriac, right? When someone complains about everything and says that everything is wrong with them and does it as a means of getting attention and or sympathy from people, right? Munchausen by proxy is when this is done to another person. Usually it's done to a child by a parent, and that parent statistically is usually the mother. Munchausen by proxy is a situation, is a condition within which mothers may pretend that their child has an ailment, or that a particular ailment that a child does have is more severe than it actually is. And that is usually done as a means to garner sympathy or attention. Okay, now this happens most often in cases of narcissism, narcissistic parenting. It also happens in cases where the mother may have suffered abuse herself in her life, or the parent, the parent that's inflicting this upon their child, may have suffered abuse themselves, or they may simply have gotten into a situation where they learn to get their needs met by appealing to sympathy and pity, or engendering sympathy and pity in others. This is something that's common among people who may have been refugees or boat people, or may have had to learn to get their needs met at a certain point in their lives by making other people feel sorry for them. Okay, most Americans are pretty proud people, right? I've been told when I was living in Spain and other countries that, we tend to walk with our head up. And actually, when I was studying in Spain at the Bellas Artes of San Fernando in Madrid, my art teacher would tell us when you were doing still life, or still life, or even portraiture, okay, to hold your head up. And he would use the example of holding your head up like an American. Hold your head up like an American. And always would make fun of me, right? Because I was the only American in the class. But most of us tend to be proud people, so we don't understand, or most Americans find it kind of distasteful to try to appeal to someone's sympathy, to try to make someone feel sorry for them. And most of us recognize that that is something that is manipulative, and it paints a person in a bad light. But what's really unfortunate is when a child has to experience being made the instrument for the parent to receive sympathy and pity from others. And that's what I want to examine right now. This is a situation that's actually hitting kind of close to home. I'm not going to discuss the details of my particular situation yet, but I may, in future videos, I may have to do that, and I may choose to do that, so I will. But this is more of an educational video. I want to help you guys understand a little bit
more about Munchausen by proxy syndrome. So let's go ahead and change screens, okay? And let's see if I can still find my Oh, that's my own video. Wow. Okay, well, I may have to do something different. Let me see. Bear with me, please. Having a little technical difficulty. I thought I had the proper screen open, but actually I didn't. It was there, but now it's not. So let's see. This is strange. It's not capturing the right window. Perhaps I can produce Dr. Grande's video first. Okay, so we're going to watch Dr. Grande's video first. I like Dr. Grande. I watch Dr. Grande a lot. I like his videos on psychology. And then, and then maybe a couple of others. I don't really want to go too far into it. I just want you guys to have a chance to understand what's going on and how this situation affects people, how it affects parents, and how it affects children, most importantly, because no child should be subject to be made to be an object of sympathy and pity, to not be allowed to live up to their full potential, basically because their parent or their mother basically wants to get sympathy from people, wants people to feel sorry for them. So we're going to go over this a little bit, and I'm going to discuss the particulars.
Helpful? Please like it and subscribe to my channel.
This is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, what is Munchausen syndrome by proxy? So this is an interesting question, and we see this disorder actually goes by a lot of names. So, as I mentioned, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but also just Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen by proxy. But none of those are actually the official name of the disorder. If we look in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, we see that the disorder is actually named factitious disorder imposed on another. Now, there's another type of factitious disorder imposed on self. And of course, that's a different disorder. We know that out of all the presentations of factitious disorder, only about 10% would qualify as imposed on another, or Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So even though the official name is factitious disorder imposed on another, I'm going to just use the term Munchausen here to refer to this disorder throughout this video. Even when it is diagnosed, a lot of practitioners use Munchausen instead of factitious disorder imposed on another. So if we look at the history of this disorder, it actually dates back to 1951 in terms of the name. Munchausen syndrome is what it was called first. And the term was coined by a man named Richard Asher. A lot of people think the term was coined by a man named Munchausen, but that's not the case. Munchausen is actually the name of a German baron who was a cavalry captain serving in a Russian regiment in campaigns against the Ottomans in the 18th century. And apparently this particular cavalry captain had a lot of fabulous anecdotes and kind of wild tales. And that's why Asher named this disorder Munchausen syndrome, because he thought there was a similarity between the clients he was treating and Munchausen. Now, this particular choice of name has been widely criticized, as there aren't a lot of similarities between the German Baron and people who have this disorder. So how do we define Munchausen syndrome by proxy? Well, if we look in the DSM, again at factitious disorder, we see a few different criteria. We see that the perpetrator, who is usually a parent or a caregiver to the victim, intentionally induces, falsifies, or over-exaggerates manifestations of physical or mental health symptoms in this other person. Now again, usually this other person is a child. So this disorder is actually a form of child abuse in most of the cases. So we see in the definition here the words physical or mental health symptoms. But I'm not aware of any situation with this disorder. I've never seen a case presentation in the literature or anything where somebody was trying to induce mental health symptoms. It's almost always talked about as physical health symptoms. I've only ever seen it talked about that way. But it is important to remember that it's possible that the disorder could involve somebody trying to induce mental health symptoms. The next criterion is that the individual tries to present another, again usually a child, as ill, impaired, or injured. And of course this is highly consistent with the first symptom criterion. The next symptom criterion is that there's no obvious external gain or external incentives. So somebody with this disorder isn't trying to induce physical health symptoms in a child to gain money. They're really trying to gain sympathy and attention. Now, in terms of the prevalence of Munchausen, we really don't know a lot about how common this disorder is. If we look at the United States and reports of this disorder in hospitals, we see there are only about 200 a year. But because this disorder involves deception, we suspect that there are many more cases that are not detected and not reported. So the devastating impact of Munchausen may be much wider than the numbers indicate. So outside of the technical criteria for this disorder, what are the tendencies that we see and the profiles we see associated with this disorder? Well, we know that 90% of the individuals who are diagnosed with this disorder are the biological mothers of the victims. And they tend to be between 20 and 40 years old. The victims are usually under 6 years of age, but of course they can be any age and don't necessarily, again, have to be children. Now, the mortality risk, so the risk of the victim dying if they're exposed to an individual with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, if they're the victim, it's about 10%. So a number of children die as a result of this disorder. Now, some other risk factors we see in terms of perpetrators. If an individual has a history of child abuse, they're more likely to have this disorder. If they have a history of personality disorders, and usually when we think of this risk factor, we believe there's more risk with cluster B personality disorders. A number of people with Munchausen specifically have borderline or antisocial personality disorders. The other two personality disorders are underrepresented a little bit in terms of being comorbid with factitious disorder imposed on another. So these would be narcissistic and histrionic personality disorders. We also see that past or current employment in the medical field is a risk factor, but the thinking lately, if we look at the research literature, has been that with all the information available on the internet about medicine and treatments, that this isn't necessarily a solid risk factor anymore. Again, because of this easy access to this information, this isn't really a reliable risk factor. If somebody does have past or current employment in the medical field, that's something to consider. But remember, anybody can find just about anything about medicine on the internet. We also see that if we look at, again, this is a mother and a child, typically. The mother has the disorder, the child is the victim. If we look at the father in this situation, usually they're detached. Usually we see a father that's detached from the situation, distant, doesn't tend to go to the medical appointments or mental health appointments if that's something that's relevant to any particular presentation of the disorder. Now, we also see that the perpetrator oftentimes really thrives on receiving positive attention, admiration, and praise from hospital or other medical staff regarding their excellent caregiving skills. And we even see in some instances where the individual with the disorder tries to get involved in the gossip in the hospital and become friends with the medical providers, particularly nurses. They tend to target nurses as potential friends. And of course, they're spending a lot of time in the hospital, so they're hanging around the same nurses over and over, and this really creates an opportunity there. Other indicators of Munchausen would be signs and symptoms that are recurrent, unexplainable, or inconsistent with reported history, or that tend to resolve when the child is removed from the perpetrator and then tend to reappear when the child is reunited with the perpetrator. We see that perpetrators with Munchausen have really a different public and private presentation. So in terms of the public presentation, they usually appear to be overly attentive and an attached parent who refuses to leave the child. But privately, if they're observed privately, they seem to be distant and uncaring. So kind of two different faces in terms of their behavior toward the child. If people are watching, there's one presentation, and if they're not watching, something else is going on. We also see that pathological lying is fairly common with Munchausen, including telling exaggerated stories regarding past family events. So an individual with Munchausen will oftentimes tell how difficult their life has been and how they've been abused and how they've had a lot of adversity. Again, really looking for sympathy. Another kind of associated characteristic would be an individual who refuses to accept a non-medical diagnosis for their child. So if there's some other type of diagnosis given and they just don't accept it, they're unhappy with it, they ask for a second opinion, they go to a number of providers, those are all kind of subtle indicators, potentially, of Munchausen. We also see that the perpetrator is receptive to and may even take pleasure in a child receiving painful and invasive treatments. And really one of the most disturbing things I read in the research literature about this disorder is for some of the people that have it, they display a gleeful excitement at the moment when their child's life hangs in the balance. So they're already experiencing pleasure when all these terrible things are happening to the child, but when the child's life is really in danger, like they're close to dying, there's an excitement that stands out even against the normal level of excitement they're experiencing. So again, just a really disturbing presentation, and this is one of the more obvious signs that Munchausen may actually be a diagnosis. Other potential indicators of Munchausen that really seem to be more available to medical professionals as opposed to mental health professionals would be if they provide vague and inconsistent information regarding the child's medical history, if they tamper with labs or medical equipment, usually in an effort to make the child sick or make them appear sick, and if they undermine a clinician's attempts to collect medical records. Those are all, again, associated characteristics that medical professionals would have better access to than mental health professionals. So Munchausen syndrome by proxy is an interesting disorder. It's a disorder that a lot of mental health professionals, medical professionals, and members of the general public are interested in. I think because it's rare and because the symptoms are really unusual, and also because it's devastating. But I think another reason would be it's in kind of an unusual place in terms of being a mental disorder. It is a mental disorder, but it involves falsifying medical information and inducing medical symptoms. So it kind of exists in a place that involves mental health and medicine. And I think that mental health professionals are usually not in an excellent position to detect this disorder, but there would be some opportunities throughout one's career as a counselor, for example, because somebody may be manifesting this disorder in a way where medical professionals aren't really seeing the symptoms yet, but perhaps a mental health provider may be able to see some of the signs and symptoms and intervene sooner. Now, of course, this is highly dependent on the presentation and the circumstances, but I think there's a real danger in just assuming that only medical professionals would be the ones to detect this. I think, again, mental health professionals do have some opportunities to see this disorder and, again, to make a report and to stop the behavior. Now, of course, I'm a counselor and not a medical professional, not a physician of any type. But I do think that mental health providers and medical providers need to cooperate. And I think the fact that this disorder exists and it's so devastating, is evidence that that cooperation really makes sense. Now, what about treatment? Well, I haven't really seen too many presentations of this disorder in my career. I have seen a few. I really have to look to the literature, though, to see the trends with the treatment. And what we really see is there's no known effective treatment at this time. One of the theories in terms of treatment would be if there is comorbid borderline personality disorder or comorbid antisocial personality disorder, to attempt to treat those personality disorders in the hopes that that would help resolve the Munchausen symptoms. But really, we don't have a good answer for this. We don't really have a definitive treatment that's evidence-based. I think clinicians faced with this type of presentation really have to read a lot of literature and get a lot of supervision and just try to do the best they can to make sure nobody's hurt. We have to do our best to keep children safe. And of course, we want to try to alleviate the symptoms for the client's sake as well. The syndrome, of course, involves gathering sympathy and admiration. So usually when I think of this disorder, it's interesting, I think of the narcissistic components first, right? They seem to be much more strongly tied to it. But we see borderline and antisocial, they seem to have a closer association. But again, there's not many cases to work with in terms of research. So I think it is reasonable to believe that there is a narcissistic component that's at work in many instances of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So in addition to the borderline and antisocial personality disorder treatments, may be possible to consider treatment for narcissism. Maybe not necessarily narcissistic personality disorder, but just trait narcissism. Now, all personality traits, of course, are stable, and I think this is really what leads to this disorder being so resistant to treatment. So with Munchausen being an unusual disorder, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of interest in this disorder, I wouldn't be surprised if a number of people had different opinions, maybe even strong opinions on this disorder. Maybe somebody has seen this close up or heard of it within their family or their circle of friends. If you have any thoughts on this disorder, please put those in the comments. As always, I hope you found this description of factitious disorder imposed on another to be interesting. Thanks for watching. Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can talk about the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. So my thoughts on the case, my thoughts on the sentence, and this request we see for an early release. So of course, Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the other people I'll be discussing in this video are real people. So I'm not diagnosing anybody here, only speculating on what could be happening in a situation like this. Now, I've put these sources here for this video in the description for this video, and this case is relatively recent, so we don't see a lot of research articles about it or anything like that. So I'm not really thrilled with some of the sources we have, and a lot of them, of course, could be disputed, like individual statements that weren't corroborated. So it's a little shaky in terms of the timeline and what exactly happened, but in general, I think we have a pretty good idea of the circumstances of this case. It's unusual for a variety of reasons.
Sorry about that. Little technical difficulty. I'm going to have to cut this video short today. We have clients, but this is the introduction to Munchausen syndrome by proxy, okay, which is something that is inflicted upon basically a child by the child's parent. We're going to have further discussion about Munchausen by proxy in future videos. Check the other Devin Lockett channel. We're going to go live later on today, and we're going to get more in-depth examination into this condition, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Until then, I'd like everyone to stay kind, stay blessed, and stay healthy. And we will see you guys later on. Thank you.
Gold label quality BiomedRx CBD oil is made from organic hemp that is locally grown, glyphosate-free, gluten-free, non-GMO, homogenized, third-party tested, and CO2 extracted. Visit www.biomedrxcbd.com.
BiomedRx Optimum Woman is the only woman's high-potency full-spectrum multiple vitamin supplement to contain 56 nutrients, including those most important for today's woman, such as calcium for bone health, iron for healthy red blood cells, beta-carotene, biotin for nail and hair health, gamma-linoleic acid from evening primrose oil, octasanol, grapeseed extract, a potent antioxidant important for maintaining capillary strength, and vegetarian digestive enzymes. Visit www.biomedrxsupplements.com.